great. We've been talking about the liberty of the philosophy and how we're getting forward. But this is a real big libertarian issue, a real live libertarian issue now. So I'm sure you're going to find it fascinating. John's really keen to take questions afterwards. Please do have some thoughts on that. John, over to you.
Well, thanks very much for inviting me here to speak. I thought we were working on two campaigns, in fact. One is about neighbouring prisoners, and the other one is about the right for people to talk to members of Parliament. We've talked about freedom of expression. What's been discussed recently, the hyperinjunctions, the attempts by the courts to stop people talking to members of Parliament. Those are, I think, two campaigns where we're working on them. What's interesting, actually, is in this building there is the Littleton Theatre. And in the Littleton Theatre was the election court in 2004-05. That was when there was massive election fraud in Birmingham. I wrote out what's called an election petition, which is how you start off an election court. And, we had the election court actually in this building. At times there were 200 or 300 people watching the court because they were that interested in what had been going on in Birmingham. And it was very interesting. And in a sense, that was one of the best examples of open justice. That is, justice was done and was seen to be done. Sadly, that doesn't apply to all judicial proceedings. And if you buy today's Sunday Mercury, for instance, which is the regional paper, you will find on the front page a story which said that somebody is being prosecuted in the courts and somebody else is being prosecuted, but they can't be named for legal reasons. Does it explain why the legal reasons are? No, it doesn't. So what we have is a secret prosecution going on in the West Midlands. And that's today. Right? So this is not something that has happened on remote occasions in the past. And the media have got particularly concerned, I think rightly so, at the growth in superinjunctions and hyperinjunctions. To be fair, there's no great merit in reading lots of gossip about people. But I did a speech on the 17th of March in the House of Commons in Westminster Hall, in which I talked about an injunction which prevents people talking about members of Parliament about boats that have potentially poisoned drinking water. Now that's a bit more of a serious issue, and in practice I approached the solicitors responsible for this injunction to try and find out a bit more about what toxins it was, has anyone been harmed. I approached them not just the week before, they didn't respond, so I approached them this week and we phoned them and said, yes, we've got the email, but we're not going to tell you, we're not going to give you an acknowledgement, and we're not going to tell you when we might respond, and they haven't responded. So it'll be quite interesting to see where that particular issue gets to. But that shows that we either have a public health issue, and we don't know who it might have affected, much as the injunctions from 2006. And yet people were banned in theory from talking to members of Parliament. Obviously, it doesn't actually stop them necessarily in practice. I can't say where I got the information from, and because of Article 9 of the 1688 Bill of Rights, we already have a Bill of Rights. I can talk about it in Parliament. Then once it happens in Parliament, it can be reported and the courts can't intervene in that, so we can talk about that issue here today. I think it's a good idea when you're doing a speech, by the way, not to do a long speech and have a very short period for questions, but actually to perhaps speak for a lesser time and then answer questions. And if anyone has an interesting point they'd like to ask me whilst I'm going along, do put your hand up and then I'll just take the question and we'll move on. The two campaigns that I've asked for support and been offered support from the Freedom Association are to do with the right to talk to an MP, the hyperinjunctions. That is, that Parliament should take action to stop people bullying people, to stop them talking to MPs. You've got the case of Jerry Lonsdale, who was threatened with imprisonment for sending me paperwork from his family court case by Bury Council. You have the case of Andrew France, who was told, he's a Birmingham citizen, he was told that his daughter would be taken into care unless he agreed not to talk to me. And there's another Birmingham case where some sisters have been threatened. That's in parliamentary proceedings as well. And they're threatened if they'll talk to me, they'll be sent to jail. Now, and their sister actually, who is a secret prisoner, is not allowed to see me. And I think that's wrong. I think that people in a democracy have to be able to complain to their MP. One interesting thing I was doing on Wednesday was I was in the House of Commons library, and there's the old records from the House of Commons from the late 1600s and early 1700s. And obviously you can't photocopy these because they're a bit fresh, so I was photographing them instead. And they go into the details of cases from that period said to me, oh, look at Article 5 of the Bill of Rights, that might help. Because I have been concentrating on Articles 9 and 13. 9 is about freedom of speech in Parliament, which is that it's important that people, if they're into this sort of thing, understand the difference, which is that if it's covered by Article 9, it can't be impeached in a court. That is, it's not absolute privilege. The court can't really look at it. Can't do it based anything on that information. And Article 13 says one of the functions of Parliament is to deal with all grievances. Well, Parliament can't deal with grievances, it doesn't know about it. So if you're having people, preventing people from talking to Parliament, to MPs, Parliament can't function. That, in my view, is contempt of Parliament. And Parliament can act to deal with contempt of Parliament. That is, in practice, if St Stephen's Tower is available to imprison people, it wouldn't happen, they'd be asked to apologise, that would be it. But the mere fact of getting an apology from a judge for banning people from talking to me would be a useful step forward to give people the confidence that if they've got a problem, they don't have to worry about bullying local authorities and bullying the judiciary. They can actually talk to their member of Parliament, who may not be very good at solving the problem, but at least they can talk to them. And that is a basic question of freedom of expression. Because if you have a situation where effectively part of the country is separate to Parliament, so you have little bits that Parliament's not allowed to look at. And this isn't about national security, this is about, actually it's all about money at the end of the day, because people making a living abusing other people's rights. But that's when you know the details of what's going on. And if you've got little bits of society which Parliament can't look at, then well, how is the democracy functioning? How is the accountability functioning? Because yes, there is accountability through the media, the fourth estate, the constitution, but the basic function of Parliament, which is to hold the system to account, not just the legislature but also the judiciary, is not being taken into, it's not happening. So one of the issues is the right of people to talk to MPs. All we need actually is a reference to the Standards and Privileges Committee, but the Speaker has been blocking that on the advice of the House Office, for those gentlemen who wear wigs in front, who sit in front of him. Not obviously, there is a range of different House Officers, and they advised him not to let it go to the Standards and Privileges Committee. I may get it through the Backbench Business Committee as well, I don't know, we'll see what happens with that in the future. So what I'm asking the freedom yourselves to do is to encourage members of Parliament to back me in asking the Speaker to reference this to the Standards and Privileges Committee. No mention of the word government. The government does not come into this. Government, to some extent, ever since the 1881, has controlled Parliament because the agenda for Parliament was given to the government, mainly because of problems caused by the Irish independence groups who were just disrupting everything. So power on the agenda was given to Parliament. Parliament got some of it back in this Parliament through the Backbench Business Committee, so it's possible for motions to be tabled without the involvement of the government. And that's the Backbench Business Committee. So that's one of the issues. And the second one is an inquiry into secret prisoners. And there are different types of secret prisoners. We have the example in the newspapers today, so if you can get a copy of something like you'll see it, where somebody is being prosecuted in secret. Well, I presume if they're being prosecuted in secret, if they go to jail, that will also be in secret. So we have somebody going through all of that process and no public knowledge of what it's about. But we know what it's about, there's somebody else being prosecuted with it. And we don't know what limits there are going to be on the trial. You have people like Martin McCabe. I can name him because I named him in parliamentary proceedings, so I can refer to that. He drove his wife, who was pregnant, and his stepson, her son, who escaped from foster care to Dover and was jailed for 14 months, I think. She is now living abroad with the two children. Her grandmother, the grandmother of the children, County Councillor Janet Mockridge, is not very happy about the situation. Because obviously her daughter and two children are somewhere on the continent. And they were just getting away from the state, who had decreed in private proceedings for relatively nonsensical reasons that her son should be adopted. And obviously, as she was pregnant, she faced the forced adoption of her baby. Now that's an issue where Camilla Cavendish has written about this anonymously in the Times, although she might write more, now it's been mentioned in parliamentary proceedings, she might write more about it. People need to know what's going on in these situations. Then there are cases, so that Martin McCabe was anonymous because of associated family court proceedings. So you've got the one in the papers today, which is anonymous in criminal proceedings because it's anonymous in criminal proceedings, which is new. Haven't seen that before. We've got Martin McCabe, who was anonymous in criminal proceedings, but actually that was because of an associated family court case. And then you have cases like Yvonne Gona, who was she's out of jail now. She's a 26-year-old lady who was put in jail for reasons I haven't been completely able to determine, but she's upset because her family has lost 4 houses on the basis of forged documentation. And she's been protesting about that, sometimes not appropriately protesting because they've done some things they shouldn't have done. But when you look at the documentation, it's quite clear that the supported signature of an individual on that documentation is different each time. The individual claims to have not signed any, and there's a different squiggle on each one. Now, obviously, if you've lost 4 properties at total value around £100 million, you wouldn't be very happy. And the result of the system has been not really to look at that, because when it was referred to the legal services, the Solicitors Regulation Authority, they say, we don't look at whether things are forged or not. And you wouldn't be very happy about that, and so she hadn't been very happy, and she was complaining about it, and then she was jailed last year in secret. But again, I named her in parliamentary proceedings, so it could be mentioned here. She was a contempt of court. And then you have care proceedings cases, and that's where somebody is deemed to be too stupid to decide where they live. They don't have the capacity to decide on accommodation, so the official solicitor comes in and runs their case. Now, we can look at one of those in a probate court, which is in Oakland, which is legal in Bristol. And basically, his GP said he's very paranoid. He always thinks the system's against him. And so they decided to evict him from the house he lived in and give half the value, well, the house isn't very valuable, worth about £100, maybe a touch more. Half the money goes to him, of that 3/4 of it goes to his solicitor. Now, you say to yourself, yeah, the GP has said he's a bit paranoid, and so he's evicted and loses 3/4 of the money he's got. Now, that's all in public documents. And that decision-making process on mental capacity is used in cases of the care proceedings, all sorts of things. Rachel Pullen's case, which is in the European Court of Human Rights, was a mental capacity case. She was deemed too stupid to instruct a solicitor, so the official solicitor came in, ran her case, conceded everything against her, without a hearing. That then went to the Court of Appeal, where the judge slagged me off for criticising some of the paperwork. And then it's gone to the European Court. But these issues about mental capacity, which, to be fair, the legalism is quite bright. Some of the people aren't so bright. There might be about 2 million people in Rachel Pullen's brackets. But you have these assessments being made in secret with unchallengeable experts, where you're not given the right to a second opinion. So the second campaign area I'm asking for is for Parliament to do an investigation into secret prisoners, for which we need a resolution of the House of Commons. Note, no mention of government. Right? This is a parliamentary inquiry, not a royal commission, not a judicial inquiry, but a parliamentary inquiry to look at what's going on. So those are the 2 things I've been asking for the Freedom Association to support on. I'm pleased to say you've agreed to support on this. And what we need to do is ask members of Parliament to support me in making those requests. Because when we get to a threshold, and the threshold may not be a majority, it may be less than a majority, then things will happen. And then we'll get the inquiry, or we'll get the reference to standards and privileges. There was a report, I think on Thursday, but maybe on Wednesday, from the Standards and Privileges Committee about phone hacking, which looked at the issue of privilege and phone hacking. Very, very similar areas. Now, anyone feel like a question, or shall I keep going? Nobody? Well, I'm sort of obviously everyone submitted at this point. So you keep going. I can keep going. I'm just trying to get some idea of what people are actually interested in all these things. I can talk more about privilege issues and how Parliament's powers exist there.
I mean, if I may say just briefly, John mentioned these 2 campaigns already, and